The morning sun had barely climbed over the dusty hills of a small Texas town when Margaret opened the door to her tiny roadside diner. The old wooden sign that read Maggie's Place, coffee and comfort, creaked in the wind, just like her spirit lately. The once bustling diner now stood nearly empty most days, and the sound of laughter that used to echo through the booths had been replaced by the faint hum of a broken ceiling fan. Business had slowed down after the highway reroute, and with bills piling up and her husband's medical debt still haunting her, Margaret was barely hanging on. She wiped her hands on her faded pink apron, poured herself a cup of coffee, and stared out the window at the endless stretch of road. "Maybe today will be better," she whispered to herself, though she had said that every morning for months now. But today, something was going to be different. Before we dive deeper into this story, if you believe that one act of kindness can change lives, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Xposed Tales. Let's spread the message of hope, compassion, and second chances together. It was around noon when the door creaked open, and 5 men stepped inside. Their heavy boots thudded against the tiled floor, their uniforms covered in dust and dirt. They looked exhausted, like they hadn't eaten in days. Margaret noticed the American flags on their sleeves and the tired determination in their eyes. Soldiers, she thought, probably returning from training or deployment. "Afternoon, ma'am," one of them said softly, almost hesitant. "You still serving?" "Always am," she replied with a warm smile, though her heart sank when she noticed how thin their wallets looked as they glanced at the menu. She could tell. They were hungry, but broke. She'd seen that look before. It reminded her of her husband Henry when he came back from the war decades ago. The same weary pride that refused to ask for help even when the stomach growled for mercy. They ordered coffee first. Black, strong and silent. She poured each cup with care, pretending not to notice how they quietly counted their change under the table. Then one of them asked, "Ma'am, what's the cheapest meal you got?" She looked at the worn-out men sitting before her and made a choice, the kind her accountant would call foolish, but her heart called right. "How about the house special?" she said with a smile. "Burgers, fries and pie, on the house." They looked at each other, stunned. "Ma'am, we can't let you do that," one protested. "Oh, hush now," Margaret said gently. "You boys look like you've been through enough. Just eat. You can pay me when the war pays you back." She turned to the kitchen, tears blurring her vision as she flipped burgers with shaking hands. She could barely afford to feed herself, and now she was giving away food. But something in her heart told her this was the right thing to do. When she brought out the plates, steaming and golden, she saw the soldiers bow their heads for a quiet prayer before eating. It was a simple sight, 5 tired men eating in silence, but it touched something deep inside her. For a moment the diner felt alive again, like it used to. As they finished their meal, the men stood up, thanked her with solemn nods, and left a small crumpled note on the counter. When she unfolded it later, it read, "Thank you, ma'am. We'll never forget this kindness. The 32nd Battalion." She smiled faintly, tucking the note into her apron pocket. It wasn't money, but it meant something far greater. That night, Margaret closed the diner early. The bills still lay unpaid, the lights still flickered, and her bank account was still dry. But her heart felt a quiet peace. She told herself, maybe kindness is the only thing that can't go bankrupt. 2 days passed. The diner returned to its usual lonely silence. A few locals stopped by for coffee, but no real customers came. The pantry was nearly empty now. She'd used her last bit of beef for those soldiers' meals. She sat by the window that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, wondering if she'd have to close down for good. Just then, a low rumble echoed in the distance. At first, she thought it was thunder, but as it grew louder, she realized it was the sound of engines, several of them, coming fast down the old road. She stepped outside, shielding her eyes against the setting sun, and what she saw made her heart skip a beat. A convoy of military trucks was pulling up in front of her diner. A dozen, maybe more. Dust billowed around them as doors swung open and soldiers poured out, their uniforms gleaming in the dying light. At the front was the same group of men she'd fed 2 days earlier. They were smiling this time, and their faces looked full of life. Before she could say a word, the man who had spoken before approached her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we told our commander what you did. He told the whole base. We couldn't just say thank you. We had to do something." Behind him, soldiers began unloading boxes, crates of food, supplies, canned goods, and even new kitchen equipment. One of them handed her an envelope. Inside was a check, signed by several officers, with an amount that made her knees weak. Enough to pay her debts, enough to keep the diner open, enough to breathe again. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Oh, my heavens! I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Just keep doing what you do, ma'am," the soldier replied softly. "You reminded us what we fight for. Not medals, not politics, but people like you." As she looked around, the entire diner came alive again. Soldiers filled the booths, laughter echoing off the walls. They insisted on paying for every meal that day, double the price, in fact. Some helped clean up, others took pictures, and one even fixed her broken neon sign out front, making it glow again. Maggie's place, coffee and comfort. That night, as the sun disappeared and the soldiers prepared to leave, Margaret stood by the door waving goodbye. The leader turned back once more and said, "We'll be back, ma'am, not for food, but for the feeling." As their convoy disappeared into the horizon, she looked up at the stars, her heart full. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. She didn't feel small. She felt seen, and that feeling was worth more than all the dollars in the world. From that day forward, Maggie's place became something special. Word spread across the state of the little diner that fed hungry soldiers, and how those soldiers returned to repay kindness with kindness. Travelers stopped by just to see her, to hear the story firsthand. Journalists came, photos were taken, and even a small plaque was placed on the wall in honor of Margaret "Maggie" Allen, who reminded us that compassion is the greatest act of service. And yet, despite the fame and the flow of customers that followed, Margaret never changed. She still greeted everyone with the same warm smile, poured coffee with the same steady hands, and always kept a small table by the window reserved for soldiers or anyone who just needed a place to rest. Years later, when asked why she did what she did that day, she simply said, "Because sometimes people don't need charity. They just need to be seen, fed, and loved. That's what keeps the world going." As she stood there, surrounded by laughter and light, she thought of her husband. How proud he would have been. She looked at the note framed on the wall from that first group of soldiers, the one that said, "We'll never forget this kindness." And she whispered back, "Neither will I." If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Xposed Tales. Let's remind the world that no act of kindness is ever wasted. It always comes back when you least expect it. Before you go, tell us in the comments below, what's one small act of kindness someone did for you that you'll never forget? Because sometimes one meal, one moment can change everything.